I launched 10 stores and they all failed. Then I heard a podcast about high ticket. And then I eventually started my first store, ended up doing over $2 million.
Some people expect ads to just be this magic solution.
They think they're just going to turn on the ads and then sales are just going to come pouring in. And with high ticket e-commerce, there's no way you don't succeed.
A bit of a misconception is you don't have to dropship products from China. There are a lot of manufacturers and suppliers in the UK, in the US, in Canada, in Europe.
If someone's really low budget, and I would say just pick the free Shopify Dawn theme. If you do that, you'll skip 10 steps of pain and frustration trying to figure everything out. Just model what already works.
Life gets in the way sometimes, and that's where people slowly start to drop off and they lose that motivation.
The difference between winners and losers is the people who fade out are relying on their motivation. People who end up succeeding, they rely on their discipline.
Welcome back to another episode of the TheoClarkePodcast, where I interview e-commerce entrepreneurs. Today's podcast is sponsored by Commercive Fulfilment, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Brook Hiddink. How are you, brother?
Doing great, man. Happy to be here.
Thank you, and it's great to have you here. So, Brook, if you wouldn't mind just by giving a summary in your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, I'll give you the 1 minute overview. So, I grew up in a small town in Canada. It's called St. Thomas, Ontario. 30,000 people, small town. I grew up playing hockey, so ice hockey is obviously very big in Canada. That's pretty much what I did from age 2 or 3 to age 18, 19. I had concussions put into my hockey career, got into university, was going through university. Kind of after hockey, that was my identity, and I lost that. So then I went through a bit of a weird period where I didn't know what I was doing. Eventually set the goal to get into law school, got into law school, got good grades, got a job at a great firm, but then something was missing. I'd always listen to podcasts. Like, I'm not sure if you've ever listened to Andy Frisella's podcast. Back in the day, it was like the MFCO project. But I would listen to his podcast, and I always wanted to start a business, but I never really knew where to start. Like, I just knew this is something I wanted to do. I didn't know where to start. I wasn't happy with law. I didn't want to go do that for the next 30 years of my life. So came across dropshipping, started like anything new, failed a bunch of times until I eventually found something that works, scaled that store up, launched an education company last year, essentially teaching that, and now I've launched 2 software businesses that I also run alongside that education company. That's the high-level overview. Moved to Dubai last year.
Amazing. I really appreciate that. And I think what's interesting is the model that you chose, right? So you refer to it as high-ticket e-commerce, but in other words, high-ticket dropshipping. Yeah. Could you speak a little bit about your entry into that? Because I believe you did start a few stores initially, didn't see any immediate success, but then pivoted and were able to find your groove and ultimately did, I think you said, between $4.7 to maybe $5.25 million in sales in your first 16 months, which is an incredible amount of revenue to do in such a short time frame. So could you speak a little bit on that journey and how you were able to do that?
Yeah, so I actually got started with low ticket. So pretty much like a lot of people do. The first stores I ever launched were these low ticket stores selling things like pet carriers or lava lamps or just like these low ticket Chinese products. And I launched a few stores, like watches, like products like this. I think I launched around 10 stores very quickly, and they all failed. I don't think they failed because low ticket doesn't work. I'm sure it works for some people, but I just had no idea what I was doing. Yeah. So then I heard a podcast about high ticket. So I thought, oh, that sounds different. That makes more sense. Did some research, and then I eventually started my first store. It was just like a very broad, my idea was modern furniture when I first started my high ticket store. I was getting really bad suppliers. The shipping wasn't working. So I thought, like, what's somewhat like modern furniture that I can like pivot to without starting a new store from scratch? So then I thought, okay, modern furniture, why don't we try saunas or massage chairs? These are like sort of furniture that would fit on my store. So then I started reaching out to those suppliers, closed some really good suppliers, and then sales started rolling in very quickly. So I think my first sale was October 21st, 2021 for over $14,000. And then the next 39 days after that very first sale, it was like $177,000. And then in the first, like you said, 16 months was about 4.7 million. I don't remember the exact number, but yeah, very, very well. And it took off very quickly. And actually the very first supplier that I made a sale with ended up being my best supplier that ended up doing over $2 million with just that supplier. So might call it luck, right place, right time. But things just kind of took off for me from that point forward.
For sure. And I think many people start in the same place that you did with low ticket dropshipping. Yeah. It's typically much more spoken about, I would say, with regards to YouTube and social media. And I come from the same place as you. I can't say it doesn't work. I've just not ever personally gone down that route and tried it successfully, or managed to do it successfully rather. But what's interesting, and what I think is a bit of a misconception, is that you don't have to dropship products from China. What's funny, and what you know as well as me, is there are a lot of manufacturers and suppliers in the UK, in the US, in Canada, in Europe, who are actually not only open to dropshipping, but actively pushing this model.
Yeah.
And you said it yourself, it allows the suppliers and the manufacturers to concentrate on what they do best, which is building a product and building a brand. Not everyone that goes into brand building is prepared to be a marketer. Maybe don't have the skill set to do that. So it's better that they can focus on what they do best and allow authorized resellers or retailers like yourself or like you were in that particular instance where you're selling products on behalf of another brand. Now, those products most of the time are actually coming from China anyway, but the supplier is shipping them in, essentially stocking them and then able to distribute them for you. So I think that's one thing that's really worth highlighting is it's the same model. The products are pretty much coming from the same place, but you're actually just working with local businesses. Would you say that's one of the key differences?
Yeah, I think the most important difference is the fact you get to leverage their brand name. So like you said, it's coming from China no matter what. But for example, if you're selling shoes and you were going to drop ship your own shoes from China, but then imagine like you're trying to drop ship your own shoes, it's probably going to be very hard. But then let's say you get to drop ship Nike shoes. It's going to be a lot easier selling Nike shoes than these no-name shoes. So like when you work with these manufacturers and brands located in the US, these brands, like I've had suppliers been around for 50 years. So customers will know the supplier, they'll trust the supplier. There'll be like thousands of people searching for that supplier every single month. So then all we have to do, as you know with Google, you can just put your products that you're selling right in front of people already searching for them. And just by nature of that relationship, just because like you as an authorized retailer, even if your store's only been around for a month, because you have a relationship where you're allowed to sell this brand's products that's been around for 50 years, people trust you right away, which is a huge shortcut versus if you were trying to start your own brand, because then no one knows who you are, no one trusts you, and you're trying to build that up from scratch. So you get to skip all that and just sell name brand products that everyone already knows they're familiar with, which I think is a huge advantage for anyone getting started.
Yeah, you get to leverage their existing brand name. So I've always kind of found that funny in some sense. Like a lot of these big brands rely on the retailers to sell their products, yet they're the ones who have kind of done all the brand building anyway, you know?
Yeah, I think like you made a good point. Like they rely on their resellers to do the selling, but it's like digital real estate, right? Like if they can just have their products being sold through all these retailers, they don't really have to do anything. Like they can just focus on making a really good product and focus on the distribution, because at the end of the day, that's what's most important in any physical product business is the distribution. So you can take a brand like EcoFlow, which is a solar kit brand. 10 years ago, no one knew what it was. Now, hundreds of thousands of people searching for it every month, and that's just because they went all in on their dealer program. So they gave their dealers good margins, 35% margins, and said, run ads to our stuff. And then they never had to really do anything on their own, but now they have this huge, well-known brand because they have this distribution system of however many retailers they have pushing their product.
I think you said a key word there, which is digital real estate, and just getting so many placements on the Google advertising network. That tends to, at least in my experience, work well for high ticket because of the nature of people actually being on Google, actively searching for products. Even if they don't yet know what brand they're looking for, they may be searching for a particular particular niche. So for example, you mentioned solar, I think we said saunas as well. So if someone was actively looking for a solar panel and all of a sudden on Google they see multiple retailers all selling EcoFlow, in their mind that's already some sort of social proof or recognition that this is potentially a good product, which then they begin the research phase, start working their way down that sales cycle, that sales funnel, and ultimately lead to purchase. So would you say Google is where you've found most of your success when you're selling high ticket products? Almost
all of it. And I think you said it right. Like I think with Facebook, the advantage with Facebook video creative, for example, is you can just put a video in front of someone and you could take them from a state where they don't even know they have a problem to the video showing them they have the problem to them wanting to buy the product very quickly. With Google, if you're selling a $10,000 sauna, it's not likely you're going to pop a video in front of someone and then sell them a $10,000 sauna. So usually, like you said, there's a process. So they might, on day number one, search top saunas 2024. Then they might come across an advertorial and see Clearlight, Sunlighten, and HealthMate are the 3 best sauna brands. And they read about them. And then the next week, they might type in Clearlight Sauna. And then that's when your store pops up because you're selling Clearlight saunas. And then they might go to your website. They might look around. They might chat customer service, they might call in. then you have that connection. And then over the buying cycle, whatever it is, we've had people on our store 10 months from when they first visit to when they buy. Sometimes it's a week, but usually it's not the first visit they're going to go buy that sauna. So I think you said it right, like especially on Google where we can target keywords rather than interests. Like on Facebook, you can target men aged 20 to 50 who like Joe Rogan. Like you can guess, but with Google, you can actually just target people who are searching for exactly what you're selling, which is unique compared to Facebook.
Yeah, exactly. You're getting in front of people that have high purchase intent, whereas I think where Meta differs is, as you know, it's more interruption-based marketing, which is why I don't think it works as well for high-ticket products, because the sales cycle is longer, it requires more nurturing. So with the benefit you have on Google is being able to sell or list a product and get it in front of someone who's actively looking for that product anyway. Or like you said, maybe they're a little bit further up the funnel looking for best saunas of 2024, but they're going to slowly work their way down that funnel and then end up purchasing the product. So maybe we could talk a little bit about actually what that initial phase looks like in setting up a high ticket dropshipping store, because again, not to keep relating it back to the China model, but in some senses, I would say there are similarities. And I just want to kind of break down that wall of people maybe not understanding how to get into high ticket dropshipping, because everyone knows when it comes to Chinese, okay, you need to try and source a product. Is there a risk involved? Is this supplier legit? Is the quality of the product good? Whereas the difference you have with working with qualified brands already is that there's some social proof there. They've already got a brand name and things like that. But the actual process of reaching out to the supplier, I don't think is all that different. You obviously need to have a store or some sort of business set up to be trustworthy in the eyes of the supplier and for them to allow you to sell their product. But the actual process of reaching out to the supplier, could you maybe explain that for people?
Yeah, so it's really quite simple. So if I was selling saunas, for example, or massage chairs, I could type in on Google, top massage chair brands located in the USA. Or I could find other massage chair stores selling those brands. And then essentially you just want to come up with a list of all the brands in your space. So we actually built a software last year called Supplier HQ that we have kind of all that research done. But now people can go find those brands and then essentially just want to reach out to them and say, hey, I'm Brook, I set up a store, I'm the founder and CEO of XYZ store. We're reaching out to brands in the space. We think you'd be a great fit because of personalized point that you've taken off their website, number one, about their brand. Can you let me know how to become an authorized retailer? And it's really just that simple. You will have to follow up a few times. If you don't get a response on email, maybe you have to pick up the phone and try and call someone. But if you just stay, I would say, somewhat persistent, every person I've ever seen who actually shows some level of persistence ends up closing suppliers in their space. And if you start with a product and you can only close a few, you can add another product to your store. So that's why I think it's usually good to have a little bit, rather than just calling your store massagechairs.com, where you could potentially reach out to all the massage chair suppliers and close 3. Maybe it's better to have wellnessequipment.com, where if you go through the massage chair suppliers and you don't get as many as you want, you can sell workout equipment, you can sell saunas on your wellness focused store and kind of have an endless amount of suppliers to reach out to, because every supplier ultimately is its own separate income stream. So every time you add a new supplier, like if this supplier A is doing $20,000 per month for you, if you can get another one, supplier B doing another 20 or 30, that's just how you grow your store, is more high quality suppliers.
And we've spoken about leveraging Google and leveraging, I guess, existing search demand of people who are there actively looking for products. How do you identify what is a good niche to go into?
Yeah, I think early on, there's a few things you want to look for. Is just number one, demand. So how many people are searching for a product per month? If it's like 1,000, like if you're trying to sell like commercial floor scrubbing things, like probably going to be hard to scale that store. Where if you're selling something like massage chairs that have 100,000 people every month searching for them, it's a much bigger market. So I think number one is demand. Number two is price point. So like you said, with your store, you were selling $300 items. I personally don't think it's any harder to sell a $5,000 item compared to a $300 item if the demand's there. So if you can sell a $500 item and make 10 times as much profit for selling one of them, if you combine the high demand with the high price point, that's how I found my success anyway. I was selling $6,000 to $10,000 items with around 100,000 people per month searching for them. And I think those two things really make or break it. And then there's other secondary factors you may want to consider, like seasonality. Like my sales would drop in the summertime because I was selling saunas, which are obviously hot. People want to buy in the winter. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't like a 70% drop. It was more like 20 to 30%. So you probably don't want to sell something like snowplows, which are going to sell like crazy for 2 months and then go to zero the other months.
Yeah.
But those three things, price point, demand, and then seasonality.
For sure. And then once you've identified that and you've picked a niche that you think, okay, I think this has legs, I think there's some opportunity in this niche, you mentioned about essentially building a website, but maybe not going too specific, like massagechairs.com, as opposed to something like home wellness or something like that, to then be able to, I guess, niche sideways. If massage chairs doesn't quite take off, maybe you can then spread into another area. So say you've picked a domain, you've picked a niche, you've built a website. The next step, as you mentioned, is just to reach out to the supplier. And it really is that simple, right? It's just maybe an email or a phone call of like, hey, I've built this store, I want to come into the industry. Would you recommend they also, if they're advertising in the US, set up an LLC first to look a bit more official?
I would say, yeah. Like, obviously, the main difference between is like a sole proprietor, you're operating businesses yourself. So, like, let's say if I have $50,000 in my bank account, and then I've never personally seen anyone in high-ticket e-commerce ever face a legal action or get sued. But hypothetically, if I was operating as a sole proprietor and I got sued, my personal assets in my personal bank account, if I own a house, anything that I own personally is going to be at risk. Where if you have an LLC, in simplest form, an LLC is just its own separate legal entity that owns your business. So if someone sues your business, you don't get sued, your business gets sued. So then only assets in your business are at risk. You can operate as a sole proprietor. So a lot of people, when they're getting started, it costs around $300 to get set up with an LLC. So if they're just getting started and they're like 19 years old and they don't have any assets at all that they're even really worried about, then maybe that $300 is better put towards ads early on. And then once they start making sales, once they get up and going, then maybe they set up the LLC. So you can do both. But I think for most people, it makes sense to start with an LLC. But like anything, there's always exceptions.
Yeah, for sure. Running an e-commerce business comes with many different challenges, especially when it comes to order fulfillment. Late deliveries, high shipping costs, and customer complaints can negatively impact your business, potentially leading to payment processing holds that will eat into your profit margins. That's why I'm excited to introduce you to Commercive, our sponsor today. They handle everything from manufacturing to storage and shipping with no hidden fees. And their dedicated WhatsApp support team are on hand to make sure you're always taken care of. Commercive offers 5 to 10 day shipping worldwide from China, with same-day processing and USA warehousing available for brands at competitive rates. Having served over 3,000 e-commerce sellers, Commercive has earned a reputation for reliable fulfillment. It's super easy to get set up. Just click the link in the video description and visit commercive.co to get a free quote. So it really is that simple then, doing the niche research, which would be things like demand, maybe Google Trends, checking out seasonality, building a website, and I assume you just pick maybe like not a standard Shopify theme, but find one that kind of fits the realms of your niche, it's kind of similar to what the competitors are doing, building a store, creating an LLC if you have $300 available, reaching out to the suppliers, and then from that point just uploading the products, setting up the Google ad account and going away with it. Is that right?
Yeah, like I think it really depends on the person's situation. So if someone's really low budget, like they don't have a lot of money to get started, then I would say just pick the free Shopify Dawn theme. Go look at, like, big lesson I've learned is whenever I'm trying anything new, you don't need to guess what works. Like if you're starting a massage chair store, like instead of guessing what does a great massage chair store look like, go find the best 5 massage chair stores that exist and then just build your website that looks like those. If you do that, you'll skip 10 steps of pain and frustration trying to figure everything out. Just model what already works. So you could use a free theme, model what already works. You could potentially set up as a sole proprietor if you really want to save money. And then, most people I recommend they start with Google Ads. But again, if someone doesn't have the budget, I'm not sure if you've ever done it, but we've had students do like B2B e-commerce. So for example, we had a guy selling fireplaces. So he would reach out to businesses that would use fireplaces, like hotels, and he would essentially offer them just through email. Hey, I have these fireplaces available. These are my offers. And then you can make sales that way without spending any money on ads. So hypothetically, you could spend no money to set up your LLC. You could spend no money on a Shopify theme. You could spend maybe $20 to $30 a month on Shopify and any apps and still be making these sales where you can profit over $1,000 per order. Obviously, that's going to be more work, more time intensive than running something like ads where it's largely automated once it gets going. That's what I think is one of the best things about the business is there's really a way for anybody to make it work if the desire is there.
Yeah, and I think one of the best things is the limited amount of risk. I mean, if you really break it down, it's very low risk. Like you just said, free Shopify theme. As long as you know how to look into search demand and seasonality, which you can do using like free tools on Google anyway, there's no real investment or upfront investment other than maybe building an LLC and putting some money into ads, which you're going to need to do at some point to get some momentum going. Or there's always an option, like you said, to actually pick up the phone or start emailing and doing B2B, almost like cold outreach, I guess, but for Ecom. So if you really break it down, as a business model, it's very low risk, high reward, apart from setting up an LLC and actually running the ads. But even when you do start running the ads, at least you're then acquiring data and learning. I think that's one of the most important things, is getting your feet wet, because that's also something that I think is not overlooked, but people don't take into consideration when getting into ecom, is you're building, I think you actually referred to it as like a Swiss Army knife, right? Mm-hmm. You're building so many different skill sets in different areas, whether it be, well, one, competitor research and understanding data and analytics and how the world works with regards to search demand and e-commerce. Building a Shopify store, which in itself is, in some senses, although it's easier now with themes and AI, but like a high ticket skill in itself. From then setting up your ads and building a business that is ultimately fueled by your own means, which is paid advertising. So there are so many skills that people learn along the way. So not only is it low risk, high reward, but you're actually bettering yourself with regards to self-development as well.
100%. Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things about the business model, is you learn so many skills. So just to give you some examples, like we've had people join the program, build their store very successfully, and then they've done what you've done. They've launched a Google Ads agency. They really took a love for the ads side of things, and then they launched an ads agency. But then the nice thing about that is once they launch the ads agency, because they've built their own successful store, they know about CRO. So then if they're running ads for a client and the ads aren't performing how the client wants, they have that insight to say, hey, potentially change this on your website. So you kind of have that holistic skill set. We've had other people come in, they've built a store, successful store, and then they've faced issues with certain things. Like one guy, he didn't like the review apps on Shopify. So then he built a review app.
Oh, wow.
So it's kind of like, I think the best way to think of new business ideas is to start a business and then figure out which problems you have doing that business, and then create other businesses to plug the holes. That's kind of what I did with my software. Is when I got started with high-tech e-commerce, the biggest pain point for people was finding suppliers, finding winning products, and doing outreach. So we built a tool that essentially just did all the research already, has all the research, has all the winning products, has the contacts for the suppliers all in just one database, which allows people to go through that much quicker than having to do all that manually.
And that is Supplier HQ, right?
Yeah, Supplier HQ.
So essentially, as you've just explained it there, people would maybe do the niche research, decide on what niche they're going to go into, but when it comes to identifying suppliers, they can then go to Supplier HQ, type in the name of their niche, and they're just going to get a drawdown of different brands who I assume already accept Dropship. Yeah. And they can just reach out to.
So both. So we have a list of products. So I think there's like 1,500 to 2,000 products that cost over $1,000 with the demand, seasonality, everything they would need to know about the product. So then if you pick a product like fireplaces, you can click in view suppliers, and then all the suppliers for that product type show with whether they enforce MAP, what the branded search demand is, what the average price point of their products is, as well as if you click in, you can see contact information pulled from Apollo of people you can reach out to at that brand. So it's just kind of simplifying that process there.
Amazing. Yeah, that's a big help, because someone who's gone through that process themselves, the way I did it was probably quite old school, and it's actually like researching the websites of who your competitors would be, trying to identify whether or not they're dropshipping, as to whether or not they have a retail premise or a warehouse, and it's quite a labor intensive process. So if you don't mind me asking, how were you able to build a software that kind of analyzes all of that information and then condense it into, I guess, a website where people can then just find what they need?
Yeah, so I got very lucky with a great business partner who's very experienced in that side of the thing. So he built the software. I didn't build the software. So he oversees the development team. I just told him what I wanted to build. So I said, like, this is what people struggle with. This is what I want. And then he actually built it. But yeah, it essentially just pulls the suppliers, pulls the products, and then we have a team of, so it's not like scanning websites. We have a team of like, I think 5 or 6 full-time researchers that all day they're just going in there, adding suppliers. And then we have, like for things like search demand of a product type, we use like an API through SEMrush, where we just pull in the data of the search demand and the seasonality. And we also have our own keyword tool built in there. So rather than paying $80 a month for Ahrefs or any of those ones, it's actually just included in your membership when you get the Supplier HQ.
That's amazing. So, and this is available for anyone to potentially use that?
Yeah.
Is it a one-time payment, a subscription? How does that work?
There's a few different tiers. So it's subscription monthly. So $29 a month gets you access to the keyword tool and the supplier list. And then $49 a month gets you access to 50 supplier credits. So you can unlock whether they enforce MAP, their price point, the average margin of that niche. And then you have like 50 credits per month to unlock supplier data is how it works.
That's great, because that really is a pain point. I see this a lot with a lot of people that get into dropshipping, is when it comes to reaching out to the suppliers, and actually successfully getting them on board, you don't yet know what the margins are going to be.
Yeah.
You don't know if they enforce MAP. And just for everyone watching, I guess, MAP is minimum advertised pricing, right? In the UK, it's called recommended retail pricing. And it's essentially the suppliers will enforce a minimum advertised price that all of the retailers can advertise at, essentially, online. Is that correct?
Yeah. So MAP just means if there's a brand and then there's 10 sellers for that brand, all those 10 sellers have to list at the same price. Because if they didn't have to, then you could just, let's say if the MAP price that everyone has to sell at is $5,000, and let's say your margin is $1,500. So you're gonna, if someone buys from you for $5,000, you're gonna have to send the supplier $3,500, and you're gonna keep $1,500. If there was no MAP, then people could start selling under 5,000, and then it would just diminish everyone's profit away down to where no one's making anything. So it kind of evens the playing field. Everyone has to keep the same price, and you have to list at the same price, which preserves everyone's profit margin. And then in my opinion, it actually makes people have to compete on actual good business practices, not just undercutting. So how good is your customer service? How good is your sales team? How well are your ads set up? What's your website look like? Does it build trust? How much social proof do you have? And these are all the makings of a good e-commerce store. So it really just kind of evens the playing field, and then you have to focus on actually being an effective e-commerce store owner rather than just trying to sell for the cheapest price.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's often something that people fear about when it comes to dropshipping, is having their store almost copied and replicated, especially in lower ticket. I see it a lot where people don't even want to share what products they sell or what niche they're in because they're so afraid or fearful that someone else is going to come in and just rip their store, which, as I understand, happens quite a lot. Do you see that happening in high ticket at all?
Yeah, like I made that mistake myself. So when I got started on social media a couple years ago, I had no followers when I got started. And I started making YouTube videos showing my store. And then I very quickly grew to like hundreds of thousands of followers, which led to a ton of people just like kind of ripping my store off, ripping my suppliers off, watching, like I would get like 5 to 10 people a day that I knew of just going through my abandoned checkout sequence. So I don't think people should necessarily be open about their products or their store. But I do think you can build more of a moat in high ticket versus low ticket, especially if you have things like a big email list, or you've built up your SEO traffic where you're getting free visitors. So if there's 2 stores selling the same products, store A is getting all their traffic from paid, and store B is not running any paid ads, and they're just getting 5,000 free visitors a month. No matter what store A does, it's going to be very hard to compete with store B, who doesn't have to rely on paid ads. So I think like over time, SEO is something that takes a long time to build up. Same with the big email list, but there are ways that you can build these moats in high ticket e-commerce. And I'd say the more moats you have, the less you have to worry. Because then if someone copies you, they still don't have your moat. They can't copy your moat. But yeah, I still don't think it's necessarily a good idea to be blasting your product, especially if you have any sort of social media following.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I learned the hard way.
Yeah. But you managed to see it through. Are you still operating that same business, or do you have a different one?
So that business, I had, like I said, one supplier was a large part of my sales. I think they're like close to 50%. They shut down their dealer program, which was unfortunate. I think that happened in the summer of 2023. Yeah, June of 2023. So a little bit over a year ago. So when that happened, I stopped that store and I moved it to a different domain that people didn't know. So I took some suppliers from that store and moved it to a different domain. But yeah, I would say ultimately I wouldn't share too much about it if I could go back. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. But you're still operating the same store that you started, but just under a different domain now?
I was. And then essentially that store, I ran it for about 8 months. And then I was going to actually start my own brand. So went through the process of ordering products from China, ordering samples, refining the samples, ordering new samples. And that process took about 8 months. And now just a few weeks ago, I had this other really good opportunity come up. And I'm essentially in a position where I'm doing too many things. So I think I'm just going to pursue the new opportunity is what I've decided.
I see. So you actually went through the process of building your own brand, but you've stopped that now to take on a different...
Pause it for now. Yeah, pause it for now to focus on this other opportunity that will be, I think, coming out in the next few weeks.
Amazing. So you still own an Ecom store doing high ticket dropshipping.
Yeah.
You have high ticket e-commerce, which is essentially your, not one-to-one mentorship, but your course. But I think within that, people can also get mentorship and build a high ticket dropshipping store. And you have Supplier HQ, which I assume forms part of high ticket e-commerce, but also people can purchase on the side with a subscription. Yeah,
it is a separate company, but for my purposes, it's like most of our customers for Supplier HQ come through the program. So I think of them as one, but like legally they are separate.
Yeah. And so say someone has gone through that process, they've done everything we've just talked about in building a store, in getting suppliers on board, whether they've used Supply HQ or done it by other means, and they're now ready to launch. We spoke on Google Ads. What are some of the problems that people face post-launch? Because we've spoken about pre-launch, which is getting suppliers and things like that, but I guess the nerve-wracking moment, I think, for a lot of people is when they start actually spending money on acquiring data in the form of ads, and maybe not seeing that immediate return on investment. Is there anything you could maybe advise as to the best way to go about doing that?
Yeah, I think it really depends on how much someone has budget when they're getting started. So I always tell people, like, imagine you're going to make no sales for a month. Just assume you're going to make nothing for the first month. How much can you afford to spend that first month where it's not going to put you in a bad spot? So if you have, if you're like in school and you don't have an income coming in, probably not a good idea to go drop $2,000 your first month on ads. Maybe you want to drop $10 to $20 a day, like $500. Where if you're working a full-time job, you have a really good income, maybe you can afford to buy that data a bit quicker. But I still think there's a big thing with ads that I see a lot of people make is like they'll turn on their ads, they won't make sales, and then they think, oh, ads don't work. It's like there's so many other things that it could be. It could be your website that isn't good. It could be you don't have good suppliers. It could be you're not following up with your leads on abandoned checkouts. All these other parts of your business that ultimately make your ads work. Like you could have an account with, let's say, a ROAS of 4. So return on ad spend means if you spend $1 on ads and you get $4 back. So that would be a 4 ROAS. So you could have an account that's a 4 ROAS, but then you could go add some CRO to the website. You could put some social proof. You could install a system to follow up with abandoned checkouts. You could install an abandoned cart email flow. And then without changing a single thing in the ad account, the ROAS could go from 4 to 10.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big mistake a lot of people make is they just go in, they think they're just going to turn on the ads and then sales are just going to come pouring in and they don't really have to do anything else. I think ultimately like ads are how you set them up and the structure you use is very important. But I think the other parts of the business actually contribute more to the return on ad spend than the ads themselves.
Yeah, definitely. I think I see this as well is some people expect ads to just be this magic solution that's ultimately going to make their business massively profitable, even if it wasn't prior to running the ads. And it's like, well, no, maybe you need to actually fix your foundation and build a better base than what you've got here. Because if you're not converting at the moment on low ad spend, suddenly scaling your ads up aggressively isn't going to mean you're going to get tons more sales. I mean, yes, you might do more revenue, but probably at the cost or your own expense on advertising spend. So I think it's best to analyze that data and, like you say, bring or build a solid foundation, whether that be conversion rate optimization, abandoned cart flows and things like that. So I guess we've kind of gone through quite a lot there on maybe how you would build a store and where would be the best place to start. Do you see, or what would you say is the key difference between someone who's doing okay and generating a bit of revenue to actually, wow, you've actually now built a very successful business here. Maybe you're getting to, 50K a month, 100K a month. Are there key differences between the business models? Or I'll add a caveat in there because it's something I see sometimes. Like you mentioned, sometimes you can strike it lucky with one particular brand who has a ton of search demand. You're getting very good positioning on the Google network, and maybe you're just really capitalizing on that bottom of funnel traffic. Sometimes it almost seems a little bit like luck of the draw. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like you said, there are some things that can make someone, you could have two people the exact same. If they have different niches with different suppliers, one of them could do way better. So there is that element of luck. But then again, you could say maybe they did better research that led to them finding that. But ultimately, I think it is luck. But then I think there is also people who could succeed in any niche. And it just comes down to doing a lot of the little things right. Like you can give two people the exact same instructions on how to build a website, but one website can be absolutely amazing and one website could be terrible. So I think it's just ultimately like the people who follow the instructions and then actually do whatever it is very well. And it's the same thing with ads. You can give people the same videos on how to set up their ads and you're going to have drastically different outcomes of people who go through the videos. Yeah. So I think ultimately it just comes down to having high standards. So doing things right and then always improving. So anytime you try something new, you're never going to be an expert at it right away. But I think just having like that desire and that tenacity to actually go and really try and improve at something until you actually get good at it. I think like people who do well, they've already accepted that they're going to win and wherever they are now. So I think in anything, whatever you're doing, if you're not getting the result you want, you just don't have the knowledge, you don't have the skills. Because if you had the knowledge and you had the skills, you would be getting the result. So there's just a gap between where you are, the knowledge you have, and the skills you want. So if your goal is to hit 100,000 per month and you're not there, then you lack the skills and the knowledge to get there. So how can you acquire those skills to get there? And if you just focus on acquiring the skills, then eventually once you acquire them, you will be there. It's like if you were going to the gym and you wanted to lose weight. If you ate a certain number of calories, walked a certain number of steps, and worked out a certain amount of times a week, you will lose weight and you will get in better shape. It's impossible not to. And with high-ticket e-commerce, if you get very good at building a website, if you get very good at CRO, if you get very good at Google Ads, if you get very good at reaching out to suppliers and closing them, if you get good at those things, there's no way you don't succeed. So if you're not seeing success, it just means you lack in one of those areas.
For sure, you just lack the knowledge or the know-how to be able to be successful. I think that's really important that you've highlighted that, because I see it myself. I've mentored some people on a one-to-one basis and helped some of them go on to build successful high-ticket dropshipping stores that are now profitable. But then you give other people the exact same time and attention, but yet they drop off or they disappear. And even though you've given them the same time, energy and effort, and ultimately the same information, it can also be whether or not you're going to actually apply that information. I think a lot of the time, in some senses, people almost sometimes know what they need to do.
Yeah.
But actually, it's just actually taking that first step, but also staying committed and turning up every day. Because I think it's one thing that a lot of people maybe struggle with, which is, I don't want to say patience, but it's sometimes you really have to just keep putting in the reps. Like you said, if you're using the gym example, going to the gym, if you're trying to lose weight, you need to do the daily steps. You need to be in a calorie deficit. You need to do all of the things that are going to allow you to get to where you want to go. It's the exact same in business, but I think the most important thing is just the repetition and turning up every day.
I think especially when people start a business, right when you sign up to anything new, you're very excited. So ton of motivation. But I think the difference between winners and losers is the people who fade out are relying on their motivation. So if they don't feel motivated, they don't want to do the work. Where people who end up succeeding, they don't care whether they're motivated, they rely on their discipline. So whether I want to work on my business or not, it doesn't matter. I'm going to work on my business because that's what I committed to do. And that goes into the repetition point you're saying. So I think like people go through a stage whenever they try something new. Like first when you sign up, you're very motivated, and then you start doing work and your motivation goes down. And then I think the next step would be called uninformed pessimism. So you start to say, oh, I actually have to do some stuff now. It's going to be a little harder than I thought. You start to hit your first couple obstacles. And then the next step below that is where most people give up, usually about a couple weeks in. But then the people who continue pushing through that get to a point of informed optimism. So they go through that really hard period, they face those challenges, they get through the challenge, and then they're like, you know what, I figured out some challenges, I can figure out the next ones too. And then eventually, once they make that first sale or they close that first supplier, once they get that first win, I think that's the hard part. When you're starting a business, you're putting in all this work, you don't see any payoff. So then once you get to the point where you actually start seeing the payoff, then the work gets easy again. Because you see, like, I put in this work, I just made my first $3,000 sale. Then it's so much easier to continue putting in the work. But you have to actually get to that point. And that's actually went into how we built the recent version of our program. So like previous versions were like, we just gave so much value, like so much content, so much value, but it was almost bogging people down. Where now the whole focus is just like, how can we get someone from just starting to making their first sale as quickly as we can? Because we know that if we get them to their first sale, they're so much more likely to stick with it longer term with that motivation. So like, how can we streamline this, strip away everything that everything possible just to get them from the bare minimum information to get them from zero to their first sale. Yeah. And then we can give them all the value after that. But we just got to get them that first win.
Yeah, I think speed is really, really important. So the fact that you've built your program around that is great, because if you leave people too much to their own devices, like you say, things get in the way, life gets in the way sometimes, to then stay dedicated and working towards a goal when maybe the outcome or the first sale seems so far away, I think that's where people slowly start to drop off and they kind of lose that motivation. Now, clearly, and I know you've said it before, you're very big on self-development, or I know you were when you were studying at law school and things like that, and it still seems like you're quite a big advocate of kind of being the best version of yourself. Would you say that's played a big attribute to your success, or is there any advice you'd give to people who maybe do feel like they rely too much on motivation? How do you stay so locked in on your goals? You know, you have multiple businesses and all of them in their own right seem to have gone on to be very successful. So I guess how do you do that? How do you remain so locked in on what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I think when I first started consuming personal development content, I don't necessarily think I was thinking about it right. So I would read, like, for example, I would read a book a week. So I read like 100 books over the period of 2 years, self-development books. I would read, I would listen to podcasts, but I would never actually do anything about it. So I in my mind, I felt like I was progressing. I felt good. I got the dopamine from reading these books, but nothing was happening in my real life. I was still $180,000 in debt in law school and a job I didn't like. And I would say now I actually consume way less personal development content, but I'm more actually just doing, taking action towards my goals. So I think going through the personal development stuff, reading those books when you're getting started, it really does help you get that initial mindset you need to start taking action. But then I think once you actually start something, I think the most important thing is to start something. Start taking action on something. And some personal development content can help you early on. But then I think after that, you really just need to focus on taking action. Like a lot of this stuff is I think intuitive. Like you can only read so many books that tell you that you need to stay consistent, stay disciplined, set goals for yourself, write down a to-do list of what you need to do. Like a lot of this stuff is just very basic. But once you have those basics, it should be more, how can I apply these to whatever I'm trying to accomplish?
Yeah, for sure. I think it really is about just taking that first step. I've always said the same thing to people that maybe don't know what they want to do or where to get started. It's like, just do something. Just take action, because more doors will open, or it will get you thinking in a different way. It will open new neurological pathways that get you thinking in a different way, which I think is why I always find the most enjoyment personally when I throw myself in at the deep end, when you're not really too sure if it's going to work. It's a new skill. It's something new that you're working on. Maybe you've just set some new ads live. You don't know whether they're going to take off. That for me is that almost opportunity to kind of bring out the best version of yourself. You're putting yourself not necessarily in a stressful environment, because in some senses it's a controlled environment, but the point I'm trying to make is just taking that step and doing something. Push yourself outside of your comfort zone, and more often than not you'll end up swimming, but you just need to put the strain on yourself to be able to then get to where you want to go. This time last year I was living with my parents at age 27. Today, I live in my dream home in Dubai. If I knew then what I know now, I could have achieved this in 6 months instead of 3 years. Within my Google Ads Ecom Academy, you can learn how to scale e-commerce businesses with Google Ads. These strategies helped me work with known ecom brands like CheeseGeek, as seen on Dragon's Den and invested in by Stephen Bartlett. I also scaled my brother's business, Trope Official, to 1.1 million in sales in 12 months, as well as many, many more. The Google Ads Ecom Academy is designed for all levels, beginners, intermediates, and experts who want to learn how to successfully scale e-commerce businesses. If you want to win with Google Ads, see the video description for more details. All right, now back to the podcast.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting, like, I think that is a skill in itself. So like, for example, when I first started my high-tech e-commerce business, going from zero to like, I had success quite quickly, but it wasn't smooth. Like it was very frustrating, and like the amount of stress I had to deal with, like payment holds and all this stuff I'd never seen before. It was a very stressful time. But like, I think just going through that is a skill in itself, because now if I was going to start a new company in a completely different area that I'd never done before, I would feel so much better because I've already done that. So it's almost like the more things you do, you get these base skills, you get self-belief, because once you go from zero to success in one thing, now you know that you can do that in another thing too. So you build self-belief, and a lot of the skills from one area are like, you'll see similarities. So in one thing will then apply to the next thing. So I think ultimately, like, the more things you do, the more things that you succeed at, the easier it becomes to succeed at the next thing. But I also think it's a very important caveat that I don't think it's a good idea to do different things all the time. Like so many people will start low-ticket dropshipping business, they'll try it for 3 weeks, doesn't work. Then they'll start a high-ticket dropshipping business, try it for 3 weeks, doesn't work. Then try an agency, try it for 3 weeks, doesn't work. Where if they had just stuck at any of those things for an actual prolonged period of time, they could have had success. So I think you have to like actually commit to focusing on one thing, see it through to fruition. But then I think, like you said, those things can lead to new doors. So high-tech e-commerce, you learn how to build your store, you close suppliers, you're running ads. And then once you learn that skill of ads, that can be the next thing, the Google Ads agency, for example. So I think things do flow into one another and more doors open, but I don't think it's a good idea to just like skip around and always be restarting either.
I completely agree. And I think you've not only said that in the way that you're preaching, but you've done it yourself. Like you mentioned, there was a brand that you were trying to build that you've put a pause on because you were observant and aware that you've taken on perhaps too much and maybe spreading yourself too thin. But the whole point of getting your foot in the door, you've done it perfectly, because you built your own high-ticket dropshipping store. And then I think what came next was high ticket ecom, where you've taught other people how to do what you do. And then not only that, you've got feedback from them of what the pain points are and the bottlenecks are, and then invented or produced Supplier HQ. So although you've got different businesses, they all overlap, and the core component of them is high ticket dropshipping, which is where you started.
Yeah. And ultimately, like, the new thing that I haven't said yet, we'll be releasing it soon, but it has now stemmed out of high ticket e-commerce. So it's a software for coaching businesses, essentially. Yeah. I don't want to say too much specifics, but it's like you said, it's been one thing to another that's all been born out of a problem in the previous business.
Yeah, amazing. I think my journey has kind of been somewhat similar, and we both started with high ticket ecom. I unfortunately never took my store to the heights that you did, but I do have a burning desire to build another ecom store, because I have the skill set there. I've taken people through it on their own journey. I have a Google Ads agency, so I know one of the key components to push traffic to the store. So it's definitely something that I'm interested in. I'm keen to maybe check out Supply HQ, have a look what's on there, and I think this conversation, even though it's realigned with thoughts I've been having recently anyway, to kind of give you that nudge to start again.
Cool,
but again, I don't want to spread myself too thin, because my route was high ticket ecom, to then become a coach for Dropship Lifestyle, to notice that a lot of people struggle with paid ads, and Google Ads was something I'd got very competent and comfortable in, to then building a Google Ads agency, selling my high ticket dropshipping store, building a Skool community, teaching people Google Ads. So I just want to be cautious not to then bite off more than I can chew. But I guess the thing I would say to kind of counteract that to myself, or maybe even people that are watching, is high ticket ecom, when you know how to do it, doesn't really need to be that complicated, especially if you're able to leverage tools like Supplier HQ. When you really break it down, it's, okay, I need to do some niche research. I can then hop on Supplier HQ, find maybe brands and products that I want to sell, build a Shopify store, which if you've done it before, could be done in a couple of days max, maybe, at least to get something in principle there. Reach out to the suppliers, get the products on, and start the ads. So when you break it down like that, it's like, it'd maybe take a couple of weeks if I actually put a few hours a day into this. Yeah.
I think Ray Dalio has a quote. It's like, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So I think like you said, I think there's certain areas that when you can do two things, then they both help each other. So for example, running my high ticket e-commerce store and having a coaching business, running the store gives me the knowledge to teach the coaching business, and it also gives me the social proof to teach the coaching business. So those two businesses work very well together. I don't necessarily think running a high ticket dropping store and then starting a coffee shop at the same time, where they're not related whatsoever, help. We're the same thing with Supplier HQ. So Supplier HQ was a business built to help another business, and like the marketing. So if I do marketing for my coaching program and I bring clients in, I'm not only bringing in clients for the coaching program, I'm bringing in clients for Supplier HQ. And I wasn't even the one building it. So like you said, I think you definitely have to be very focused with your time. And it got to the point where the brand was actually something a little bit separate that was taking up a lot of time, where it felt different, separate to me than everything I was working on. And that's why I had to pause that, because there's like this almost flow of businesses that have been going on between like the high-ticket e-commerce store to the coaching program to Supplier HQ, and now this new software we're launching. It all fits together very nicely for me, where the brand was separate, didn't fit into that. And I think mentally and focus-wise, you really have to, especially early on in any business, you really have to have like a lot of focus. And then once you build it up, I'm sure like with your store you can outsource a lot of stuff, and you can kind of remove things as you go. But early on, you have to have a high level of focus, I think, to ever get anything off the ground.
Yeah, for sure. You've been reading Russell Brunson, I think, haven't you?
I have, yes.
And just building businesses that almost sell into one another naturally. And you have that initial kind of tripwire, I guess, and then selling into another program or a software and things like that, which was in some ways my thought process with the agency was starting YouTube, building a podcast, although this is more of a passion project. But then I realized not everyone that watches the podcast, even if they're ecom related, is qualified for the agency or a good fit for me to deliver Google Ads, but maybe they are for education and they want to learn Google Ads, hence the Google Ads Ecom Academy, which then upsells into the agency or into one-to-one coaching and things like that. So I've also tried to do, I guess, what you've done in that sense. But now, like I said, I have that itch from like, high ticket ecom, I'd love to get my feet wet again. But I guess it's different because I have a team who in some senses can deliver on the agency service. The podcast is mostly automated. I turn up to do the recording, but I fortunately have a team who do the editing and the posting and things like that. So I'm trying to justify it in my mind. I'm like, oh no, you've definitely got enough time to build a store. I just haven't taken that initial step yet.
Makes sense.
But you've said a few times, not on this podcast, but before, that you recommend that people really kind of trust that gut feeling a lot of the time. And I think that means so much more than what people think it does. Like, not to go down a rabbit hole, but they say, or maybe you've heard people say, that your gut is like your second brain. Like, your gut microbiome has neurological pathways into your brain, and that saying, trust your gut, means so much more than what people think it does. So is there, I guess, anything that you would say to people who maybe haven't taken that step yet, that want to get into a new business, maybe want to get into high ticket ecom? What would you maybe recommend to them, other than obviously just trust your gut?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, and I only know this because it was me, you're brought up with your family, and then like your family conditions you with certain beliefs, and you're going to have beliefs from your family, you're going to have beliefs from the school you went to, you're going to have beliefs from the city you grew up in, and that's kind of where you frame a lot of your early beliefs. But I think beneath that, whenever, I think you ultimately know that whether or not you should do something. So like for me, I knew I had all these things, but I still knew I should start a business. And then I think early on, I think it's very hard to listen to that feeling. So I think it could be like, for me, I always think it's like, I think of God telling me that's what I should do through my gut. That's how I think of it. And I think like if you listen to that thing once and then something good happens, like for me, the first time I really listened to that feeling, which was very, very hard, was dropping out of law school. So I dropped out of law school with like 3 months left. Before I graduated, I was like on the dean's list. I had like a great job, and I dropped out 3 months before I graduated because I knew I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to have the backup option. I didn't want to go and continue running my e-commerce store, hit a hurdle, and then think, oh, I have this job. I wanted to just go all in on that. I'm not saying anyone should do that. That was just, I know I do well with my back against the wall, so that's what I chose to do. Not advocating that you do anything like that. But that was when I listened to my gut for the first time. And then I think the second time would have been moving to Dubai. And these have been two of the best decisions of my life, I think. So anytime I've listened to that gut, where I've had this urge to try something and I've listened to it, it's always worked out amazingly. Even if it's not right away, if you wait a bit of time, it has always worked out perfect. So I think ultimately people know what they should do, and it's just to actually trust themselves enough to do it.
Yeah. Do you know what's quite funny about that story is we did the exact same thing pretty much, in that I had actually finished university and qualified as an engineer, and I was working full time. But then COVID came and I was working from home. That was when I finally got the time to go through the high ticket dropshipping course that I'd purchased, built my store, and I'd got my suppliers on board. Maybe I had like 5 or 6. I'd just finished uploading the products, and I got a call from work to say, it's time to come back in. We're opening the office again. And I thought there and then, I was like, if I want to make this dropshipping store work, I need to give it my everything. And I hadn't even got a sale yet, and I just said, I'm not coming back in. And lo and behold, I made it work. I didn't take it to the heights that I would have liked, but hey, it was a successful store that I went on to sell. And I truly believe it was the same reason as you. Like, I had to, like I said earlier, throw myself in at the deep end. And I knew kind of what we've been talking about here, to not spread myself too thin. If I went back to working a 9 to 5, not to say you can't do it. And again, I'm not advocating that people quit their job to do something they don't have proof of concept in. I was in a unique scenario where I decided to do that. But sometimes it goes back to what we're saying, spreading yourself too thin across too many different things. And sometimes I think like working a 9 to 5 can be a bit of an obstacle for some people. When you get home, maybe you have other commitments, maybe you have family, maybe you're trying to lose weight, maybe you're in the gym. Time is scarce. And I think that's why something like high ticket e-commerce, where you've tried to cut out all the fluff, not that I've been in there, but I trust it's a great program to get people from kind of point A to point B as quick as possible. So yeah, it's just interesting that we had a similar story there, where we both just went all in, but hey, I guess it worked out, and both ended up in Dubai, coincidentally.
Yeah, funny enough. Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think we were probably, I don't know what your situation was like, but I was at the time not married. I didn't have any kids. I didn't have any responsibility, so I could go all in without any real risk. Like, I think a lot of people who I work with now in the coaching program, they do have kids, they do have a wife, they do have a home with mortgage payments, where I think it's a lot harder. Like, if I was in that situation, I don't think I would go all in. But then, like you said, you have to just really have that discipline to put the time in around the work, whether you get up earlier or you do it right when you get home. And it's very hard to do that. Like if you're working in 8 hours at a job and you come home exhausted, very hard to go work on your business. But ultimately, if you want that change, you have to do it. You have to find a way to do it. And then like, I think a lot of people, what I say now is if you're working a job, I would say at least get your store to where your income is at from your job, maintain it for a decent period of time, 3 months, and then at that point make the decision. But again, if you're young, like we were, and you have the luxury of, like at the time I was living at home, I didn't have any expenses, I didn't have any real responsibility, I could go all in and it wasn't going to be a big deal if I failed. So I think every person's different depending on where they're at in their life.
Yeah, I was in the exact same situation. I was fortunate enough to still be living at home. My parents were able to support me regardless of whether or not I had direct income. I had some savings. I think you were in debt, which is obviously a little bit different. But yeah, I had some savings, and in my head I was like, well, that's what savings are for, right? Is to be able to support you in times of need, or maybe when you're trialing different things. So yeah, definitely wouldn't advocate that people quit their job until maybe they've supplemented their income or at least matching it.
Yeah.
And go for it. Because I think when you do take that step and go all in, that's when it's really going to change for you.
I agree. Like if you can just get it up to where you match your income while working a job, imagine when you go all in. Then it's going to grow very quickly from that point forward.
Yeah, game changer. Well, Brook, I just want to say thank you very much for coming down. I think you've dropped a lot of value. I really enjoyed this conversation. And you have mentioned a few, two different businesses that people could potentially use at the moment, which is High Ticket Ecom and Supply HQ. You spoke on both of them already during the podcast, but do you want to maybe just let people know where they can find Supply HQ and High Ticket Ecom, and I guess exactly what would be involved if they did join your course or coaching program?
Yeah, so High Ticket eCommerce, the best website to go to is called highticket.io, so just HIGH ticket.io. There's two main programs. So there's a program that's more group coaching focused, so there's around 10 hours of group coaching calls per week with various instructors on things like SEO, Google Ads, business setup, where there's 10 hours of group coaching calls per week, and you get a full program showing you everything what to do along with a bunch of bonuses. And then there is a higher ticket program that's a little bit more expensive, where you get all the same thing, but then you also get a one-on-one coach where you go in a Slack channel. So for anyone who doesn't know what Slack is, it's like Discord. And then your coach works with you one-on-one throughout the whole process. So you kind of have, the best analogy I always give is like, imagine you joined a gym. When you go to the gym, you have your group fitness classes that you can go to and attend. The one-on-one program would be like hiring your own personal trainer. So the gym is the same, the course, the program is the same. It's just a different level of higher support that we have. So that can all be accessed at highticket.io. And then Supplier HQ is the software, which is just supplierhq.io, which again, when you go on there, there's different subscription plans. There's a $29 a month, a $49 a month, and I think there's a $99 a month with all different tiers of how many suppliers per month you can unlock, as well as how many keyword searches you get per month and that sort of thing. But yeah.
Amazing. You're very good at breaking things down in a very simple to easy to understand way, and using analogies as well. So thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it. I'll put the links in the description of the video, which can be High Ticket eCommerce, Supply HQ, and obviously also your personal links in case anyone wants to reach out on Instagram or Twitter. But thank you again for coming down.
Pleasure having me. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you.